Dr. Safa has some practical advice that she has picked up over her career working in dentistry, and also has studied in this area specifically to try to help herself and help colleagues. So I'm super excited today to have Dr. Safa with us. Welcome, Dr. Safa. Thank you so much for giving us your time this evening. Also, I've been to a couple other events where you've spoken that has been extremely enriching and rewarding. So thank you for those. And for our other viewers who are just meeting you for the first time, why don't you talk a little bit about your personal background, professional background, and how you became interested in mindfulness as a strategy for reducing stress?
Sure. Thanks, Julian. And thank you for inviting me to speak. It's always an honor. And I'm really happy to share this information with your audience and with folks who've tuned in. So thank you, everybody, for coming and listening to this. And we hope to answer some questions for you at the end if I don't answer it throughout. So how I sort of got into this work was I actually studied stress for my master's degree. I'm a master of stress, so in every sense. So I actually studied under a field called psychoneuroimmunology. So at University of Toronto, all the specialty programs are master's programs. So you have to, choose a master's to do. And I didn't want to pipette bacteria and liquids in labs. So I have actually a sociology background. I have my BA in sociology. So I decided to have co-supervisors, a cell and molecular biologist, and then the head of sociology. So my master's was looking at acute and chronic stress in its sort of initiation and progression of periodontal disease. So I got to make questionnaires on acute and chronic stress, and I got to study stress. And so I had come across the idea that stress was not good for us. And the idea that probably acute stress was okay, but chronic stress wasn't. So my thesis, which I published, was to develop surveys and questionnaires to put in patients' charts at U of T, where we can long-term study what is the relationship between stress and periodontal disease. So my 3 years at U of T was spent studying stress. So that's kind of the background of how I got into, this idea of the interest with stress.
So in your view, was stress related to oral health, or were these two different interests that just happened to meet, in certain respects?
Yeah, so there was a lot of research at that time linking stress to lots of diseases. And so there was a lot of buzz at that time. Now we're going back about 10 years, so 11 years. There was a lot of buzz about the effects of stress on the human body with inflammation. And we know that periodontal disease is a chronic inflammatory condition. So we were really curious to see, can we contribute to the research already out there showing that stress does affect. So not only can we see that stress affects the way people take care of their mouths, but we do see that, that constant pumping of cortisol in the system is actually not good. And we can actually measure the level of cortisol in the saliva. And so, we don't do that on our patients on a regular basis, but we know that one of the most detrimental things about stress is that the chronic nature of stress, that the hormones that are pumped out during chronic stress are way different than the ones that are pumped out in our system during acute stress. So whenever we talk about good and bad stress, we're talking about the chronic usually is the culprit, and cortisol being and some glucocorticoids being the ones that mediate a lot of those disorders that we know about. And dentists are not immune to those diseases, the cardiovasculars, the cancers. Yeah, so it's tied for sure.
So it was related, both clinically, for your patients in that they both contribute to similar outcomes. So if you can deal with one, maybe you can help improve the other. And it's also related sort of personally, you're a practicing clinician.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Just, I think that'll be a point of reference for a lot of our viewers.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm in the trenches. In the trenches, like, yes, we go to war every day. I mean, it feels like I go to war every day, but I don't. But I'm a periodontist, and so I've been practicing perio in my own practice for 10 years, and you know, managing staff and working and as everybody knows, in a bit of a tense environment. And my personal journey with dentistry was a bit interesting because I had gone into it like everybody else does, that this is going to be a lifelong career. And, you know, this is pre-COVID, even post-COVID it will be. But
Yes.
I was, you know, I was in this state that, you know, well, dentistry is stressful. Everyone knows it. And I'm just going to be like everybody else and I'll just deal. So there was a very specific point in time where
Is that like a badge? Is that a badge that dentists wear, that we work in a stressful environment and we handle it? Or
yeah, so
I'm a lawyer, so we don't know about stress so much.
yeah, right? No, you don't know anything about stress. You're a lawyer. No, of course. And we have so much in common. So yes, we wear it as a badge of honor, not a badge of honor, but more what's kind of distilled down is, yeah, dentistry is stressful. Yeah, everybody knows it. And, you know, you just grin and bear it. You keep calm and carry on. And it's not really spoken about much. And if anything, I could say that there's a tiny bit of a taboo in people, you know, oh, come on, you can just deal with it. And there's a bit of that, you know, grin and bear it mentality. And what we've noticed is that technique didn't work. If that worked, we wouldn't be here talking about stress. If that worked, if the grin and bear it was a coping tool, then we wouldn't be having the levels of stress and anxiety that creep up in society, but also in our profession. So obviously that thinking wasn't helping us. So I think there's a slight shift. Hopefully it's happening in dentistry to now bring it to our awareness.
Which is great. I think, yeah, you can't deal with or manage anything that you're not aware of, right? And you don't understand. So there are a lot of different ways to deal with stress. You know, I think some people will have a nightcap. Others go on vacation.
Yeah.
My wife is very open with the fact that she sometimes needs to escape into a book or a Netflix series, and you know, she's very open with that's her mechanism for coping with stress.
Yeah.
I sometimes need to go for a run.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily cope very well, so I'm actually looking forward to maybe hearing about other ways that I might be able to. But you became interested in mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what mindfulness is? Maybe how you became interested?
Sure. I became interested out of necessity. I reached a point where I knew I wasn't okay. And what I mean by that is I was functioning on the outside. So just like everybody else you see at the meetings, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. No one really is curious about your answer. It's just formality, right?
Right.
And so I noticed that I would be asking people like, you know, I don't know, I just feel there's so much to deal with in the profession. There's so much, but it just wasn't spoken about. So I reached a point where one day, and my husband's also in the profession, I said, I'm not okay. And this is not how I'm supposed to be. I should not be having a panic attack at work. And for anybody out there who's had a panic attack, it is probably one of the most horrific things that can happen to you, because you feel like you're dying. You're not. You're in dentistry. You know your body. You know that nothing's really wrong with you, but you can't explain it. So I fought my anxiety and panic attacks like I was like, that's not me. Like, I don't do that. I don't do the panic attack stuff. And that kept making things worse, because instead of realizing what was happening, I was just, again, pushing myself until one day I realized, you know what, I gotta do something. So I'd heard through my research that stress was bad for you. And then I'd also heard, you know, mindfulness. It was this like thing. Everyone was talking about mindfulness. Mindfulness is the new black, right? So I picked up a book, which is Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn's very famous book. And he's done tons of research out of the University of Massachusetts for 30 plus years in the field. And so I started to get interest in that. And then I started to take courses. And I was like, okay, he's a medical doctor. He's practicing mindfulness. Maybe it's going to help me. So I went down to New York, where you're from, and I did
My
some
hometown.
courses, my hometown. I did some courses. I then started to participate in some retreat style where I do sit for 62 hours of meditation. And then I realized that there was a lot of uncovering to do and that this wasn't a quick fix. I was literally thinking I'm going to fly to New York, sit on a cushion for 6 days and come out completely like healed, like those moments where someone like hits you on the. So a moment like that did happen, but not in a pretty nice way. It happened in a pretty dramatic way. So I realized that I needed to keep working on this and not denying the fact that I needed help coping. So mindfulness, so that's how I stumbled across mindfulness.
You didn't stumble across. Sounds like you crashed into it.
I literally fell on the cushion. Yeah.
I mean, you said it so casually.
Right.
The thought for me of sitting on a cushion for 6 days in a row, that I almost had a panic attack just thinking about it. Just like,
I had a panic attack on that cushion. And actually, what a better place than there to have a panic attack, because what happens is when we wall off certain feelings and emotions in our body, and when we just pretend to say it's okay, it doesn't go away. That energy actually walls off and gets stored somewhere. And until you kind of break it, it's always with you. So you expend a lot of energy in containing a lot of these strong emotions. Some people have lots of anger, some people have anxiety, some people, have lots of different things that, they deal with on a day-to-day basis, but they just ignore it. And so at some point that break happens for certain people. For some people, it never does. But I was lucky enough that I listened to it. And so on that cushion, that one day, I was like, yeah, no, this is serious. So, and I didn't want to live like that. There was a part of me that was like, I think I can live differently, but it was going to have to be going against the grain. And so I was very quiet about it, as if I was doing something like don't say this to anybody. Don't say you're going on over. Don't talk about panic attacks. Just do it. Not even my family really knew. They just knew I was taking a course. And so it was,
it's hard to talk about your own stress. For some people, I mean, some people can talk about anything, and I admire that. I know personally, I'm a secretive person when it comes to my emotions. And so just to say that I could definitely empathize with your approach to that. So then you got to the retreat. It was 6 days long.
Yeah.
You're on a pillow.
Sat on a cushion. Well, it's called a zafu. Those round cushions that meditation people sit on. Meditation people, as if they're a kind of people. So it's called a zafu.
It's a tribe.
So it's called a zafu, and the cushion that goes under the zafu is called a zabuton. So if you want to, it's like if you want to just say you meditate, you just say, oh, I sit on my zafu, and then you got it covered. You don't even have to meditate. But yeah, so yeah, I learned how to sit, and I learned how to focus on the breath. And I learned how to try to imitate what everybody else was doing. So I would sit on a cushion, and I'd kind of sneak peek around me, and everybody was sitting on a cushion. And I did this for an hour, 2 hours. We took a break, back on the cushion, 3 hours, 4 hours. And then I literally left the room. I was like, not for me. I was like, you know what? Because I could not turn off my brain. So then it was like being in prison, because then I was sitting still, knowing people are watching me. And then my brain was nonstop. So I was actually, it was kind of torture. And so when I went to the instructor after, I was like, mic drop, I think I'm out, because this is not what it's supposed to be. And I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do this. And she was so kind, and she still teaches, and said to me that that's the whole point. And I was like, no, that doesn't sound right. And she was like, yeah, meditation is you sit, you observe your thoughts, you don't judge them, and then you come back to breathing. And I was like, and how is this going to help me? So
you were sitting, observing your thoughts, thinking that you were failing at the whole meditation thing. And then she told you you're actually doing it right.
She's like, you're right. And I was like, you're wrong. I was like, no. It's supposed to be some euphoric state where like I float into the air and like I get all clean in my head. And so the interesting thing is mindfulness meditation is very different than other types of meditation. So there are like transcendental meditations, TM, I've never done it, chants that you do that you kind of do have this maybe out of body experience or a very clearing experience. Mindfulness meditation, there's no secret to it. It is just observing what's happening in the body and in the mind. And if that means all you do for 10 minutes is observe thoughts, come back to the breath. A thought pops in, you come back to your breath. That repeated motion is what changes the brain structure. So neuroplasticity.
Can you talk about, I'm excited about neuroplasticity.
Oh yeah, zingy word.
Can you just tell me, what's the difference between thinking and observing a thought?
Yeah, so thinking is what the brain does. So thinking is, you and I are thinking right now. Thinking is what the brain is meant to do. The brain is meant to think. The observer is the little guy or girl, whatever you want, that is watching you think. We don't want to get too crazy about this, but it's you observing your thoughts. When you can call out yourself thinking, that's you observing your thinking. So I might be thinking all the time without awareness. The minute I bring my awareness and I say, oh my God, all I was doing for the past hour was thinking, you know, that bobblehead. That's now the observer going, I've been thinking and only thinking. So now what I'm going to do is give myself permission to maybe breathe. And I don't know if you all want to try that for just a second. The idea.
This is a good time.
If you want to, because I probably need it too. So all you would do right now is your brain is thinking. So if I just quiet myself just a little bit, it's going to take time for the system to settle. And what I want you to do is with your eyes open or closed, or what they call demure eyes, which is a downward gaze. I want you to put your hand on your belly and just take one deep breath. And exhale. Now what I want you to do is just feel your sit bones, your bum, on the chair. Like I just want you to make yourself so heavy as if literally you're melting into your chair. And that took maybe 20 seconds, 25 seconds. And we just switched on our parasympathetic nervous system.
Oh, it felt good.
And you just, that's it. So that process where we just dropped in, that breath is the one sure thing that's going to trigger your parasympathetic nervous system. Because the nerves that are attached to your diaphragm trigger the parasympathetic nervous system. So the minute you take a deep breath, the diaphragm has to activate. When that activates, it takes us from sympathetic, which is fight flight, into parasympathetic, which is calming. You cannot be sympathetic, fight flight, and take a deep breath at the same time. It's actually biologically not possible. And the reason is the body's protective mechanism. Fight flight is supposed to get us out of trouble. It has a protective mechanism. There ain't nothing wrong with fight flight. It's meant to get us out of a terrible situation, like a tiger chasing us. Right now in our lives, there's no tiger. None of us are in imminent danger of our life, but our fight flight system is turned on because there's so much going on. And so we want to fight or flight something. So our breathing becomes shallow. It becomes chest breathing. So the minute you do a diaphragm breath, if you were a frightened gazelle about to run away from a tiger, you wouldn't take a nice deep breath. Because that actually is counterintuitive to what you need to do. You need to start to hyperventilate to increase the oxygen and run. So that 2-second process, call it 20 seconds, that's practicing mindfulness. Because the minute you take your awareness from one place and stick it somewhere else, you are using your neural network. And when people talk about neuroplasticity and these practices, they're saying you are thinking. There's nothing wrong with thinking. That's what the brain does best. But what's important is observe your thinking once in a while give yourself a break, take a breath, 2, take 10, take whatever. It doesn't have to be long. There's no time. But the minute you feel the heaviness and just the dropping of the shoulders away from the ears, that right away just relaxes the system. So it's with repeated trials of this will make it a habit. Now, some people, like I use this in the office, every time the patient's chair goes back, that takes about 15 seconds, oh, Mrs. Smith, I'm going to put the chair back. My assistant and I both breathe during that time. That's our breathing time. So we've talked about it. We've synchronized. We both look out the window, because luckily we have a window that looks to sky. So we would just look at the clouds. Immediately that triggers parasympathetic nervous system, because sympathetic is a gaze, right? It's very laser focused. When you're focused on a tooth with your loops, that's sympathetic nervous system. So you look around, get a global view, that triggers parasympathetic. So that's something I've incorporated into my practice as a way to just before I start with my patient, and my patients feel it. So the minute I take a deep breath, because we're so close to them, they feel it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just had so many thoughts while you were talking. In terms of the closeness, if your patient picks up that calm parasympathetic energy from you, the opposite is also potentially true, I imagine. And that might not be a great thing, because I know personally as a patient, for some reason, there's something about the dental chair, even if I'm just in for a cleaning, which I find very rewarding.
Yeah.
I'm not stressed before I get there for a cleaning, but then once I lie back, I feel very vulnerable and uncomfortable, and thinking about the shallow breaths and the muscles, you feel them start to tighten. I feel that in a dental office, and I have to imagine that being around patients with, especially, there are phobic patients whose stress is probably palpable.
Yeah.
I'm not phobic, but I can imagine that that's probably a workplace hazard in some ways, and so having that strategy is so great.
Yeah. And actually, that workplace hazard has a name, and it's called mirror neurons.
Okay.
So what they are, mirror neurons are biologically in all mammals. Mm-hmm. Julian, if I start running, like if I run away right now, you're going to be like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. The same thing happens in soccer stadiums. One person runs and a stampede happens, not because anybody else thought or saw anything, but because one person was running, everybody was running. This behavior is very common in herds. It protects the herd. So if one gazelle looks up, all the gazelles look up, because nobody wants to be tonight's dinner. In dentistry, this has been observed with something called mirror neurons. So what's biologically in all of us, to be able to see if you're in danger, I'm in danger. If you're in danger and if you're my patient and you're highly stressed, you get in there, you're tense, I can see your knuckles, furrowed brow, shallow breathing, you don't want to be there. I, even without wanting to, will absorb some of that. Because if you're in fear, maybe there's something scary here. So although I know there's nothing scary here, mirror neurons don't know that. They pick up danger, and so they start to get zingy. So dentists we never heard about mirror neurons. Our medical colleagues are actually doing research with mirror neurons. And a gentleman by the name of Judson Brewer, he introduced me to this in New York, and he's a medical doctor, he's a neuroscientist, and he's got all sorts of apps and books and podcasts. And when I said to him, I don't understand why dentistry is so stressful. Why should it be so stressful? And so mirror neurons is that if you're my anxious patient and I don't protect myself against your anxiety, then what's going to happen is I'm going to pick that all up. My system is going to be revved up like yours. So it's actually to my benefit if you're calm. But we can't expect that of our patients. I can't put that burden on you. Julian, you better come calm to your appointment. No, but if I speak to you about it, and if I say, there's these techniques of breathing, I'm going to breathe, And I've done this with my patients because I'm doing surgery. And I mean, the minute they hear or see scalpel, I mean, it's game over. So I often will do a body scan with my patients. So when the chair is going back, I do tell them, I say, you know what I want you to do? Can you send all your focus right now into your toes? And I want to see your toes move. And so the minute they do that, right away, they're like, oh my God. Like they're like, oh, that was so weird. Like, I don't want to think about my toes. I'm like, yeah, because you're so worried in your head. So if you just do incorporate some of those things, you will protect yourself. So I now tell dentists and dental students, please be aware and make yourself aware of mirror neurons because they play a huge part in us feeling drained at the end of the day. And so if that means you might have to provide some sedation to your highly anxious patients so that you protect them and yourself, go for it. If you're trained and you're qualified, I used to refuse that. I was like, I'm going to treat all my anxious patients. And you know what? With my good bedside manner, no one has to be sedated. It took a toll. And I used to think that I'm so great at treating 98% of my patients without sedation. But in the end, they were fighting it. I was fighting it. They were nervous, got me nervous. And I think in hindsight, I may have incorporated calming tools. Now, whether that's me protecting myself or me offering that to my patients, I think it's really helpful for dentists to know that anxious patients can be dangerous for us. And they've shown through studies that our heart rate, blood pressure, and respiration goes up with the patients.
Right. And one day, maybe that's not a big deal, or 1 week, but when you have a lifelong vocation, that can certainly build up over time. I think it's fascinating, the idea of, doing these meditative exercises and these mindfulness exercises.
Now you're in the dark.
It's okay. I kind of like the side lighting.
Yeah. Actually, it's nice.
I'll just go with that. To calm the patient down, and in the idea of it, either in some limited circumstances replacing possibly sedative drugs is amazing, because obviously they have also sometimes potential for adverse events or unintended consequences, or even supplementing them in other cases where either you don't need as high a dose, or different modalities of sedation and anesthesia. And so maybe instead of having to do things asleep, you get do nitrous and meditative breathing, for example, together. Place a more invasive modality. So there's so many ways that you can apply this clinically. It's really exciting. I'm sitting here thinking I'm getting excited. Let's talk about one of the common stresses I think that people have now, which is COVID-19. And a lot of dentists, and I think even to a higher degree, dental assistants, administrative support staff, and hygienists are very anxious now about fear of the unknown, self-preservation. Beyond chairside, we can come back to chairside, but beyond chairside, are there ways to incorporate mindfulness into your team routine, your huddles, or your morning meetings? Have you done that, and how it worked?
Yeah. So it's interesting. When I started to do this work, only my assistant knew, because she started to notice that I actually had started to incorporate these tools in my day-to-day. She'd see me breathing, she'd see my behavior change. And she was the one that right away, and she's been my assistant for 7 years, she right away started to sense that, and she kept saying, can you give me some of the stuff you're doing? Can you share some of this information with me? And I was like, yeah, sure, of course I can. And, it was very casual. And what happened is, when I first started to speak to dentists about this, many times people would say, but this shouldn't be just for us. We should have this for our staff. So at some of the meetings that I did, some staff came. So whether it be assistants and hygienists, and it was really nice because we were all sort of sharing in the same. And so what happened is, I realized that I wasn't doing anything for my staff. So I was sort of doing this for the dental community. I was doing this for the outside, but we weren't doing anything in-house.
Mhm.
So one day I said to my staff at a staff meeting, I said, guys, you hear me talk about mindfulness, and I practice it and I do it and I meditate and and would you guys like a voluntary, no commitment, not paid, you come in at your lunchtime, and we do a mindfulness thing and like an exercise.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, we want that. So I was like, no problem. So what we did is, it takes a little bit of intention. You have to turn down the volume on the phones, which no dentist wants to do, and have your staff not answer the phones, which again, no dentist wants to do. And what we did is we cleared out the waiting room. They brought yoga mats, and I turned down the lights. I actually bought one of those, not an incense that you burn, but it's like a diffuser with some very light, sort of calming oil that I was burning. Some people have that in their offices now as a aromatherapy. So I put that on and I guided them through a body scan.
Mhm.
And what I said, and because it was a trial, and so there was about 10 of them, what I said is, you know what, guys, I'm going to send a survey monkey to you all after, anonymous. I'm not going to know who you were. I want you to be honest. What did you think? And would you want more? And the response was unreal. They were so happy. They were happy not to take their lunch alone. They asked for more. They wanted to be together. They wanted to share in this experience as a team, but also have the doctors share the experience. So it wasn't, oh, this is not for us. This is for you guys. You need to de-stress. We're fine. No. It was like, we are all going to do this together. And that's one thing that I find when people, they want the staff to do it, they want others to do it, but the doctor is not going to do it. And if we're going to set an example as a mindful leader, then we're going to participate in those. And it is a bit vulnerable to do that, but I don't think it has to be. It can just be, I've heard this is really good. I'm going to participate with you guys. And so what we did is then we expanded it to one more office. So then we had the 2 offices coming into my office. So then we had like 25 people in my waiting room. So it was 2 different specialist offices. Everybody came to ours and we did one. And then I sent another survey. And so what I found is there is an unbelievable need in the staff that support us for this.
Mhm.
And there is a lot of research showing that an anxious leader is going to only create anxiety in their staff. Our fast pace, our demands, our language, our behavior is going to affect the people around us, just like it does in your household. It does at the office as well. So the idea isn't to fix them. It's to do what you think is right for you, but also offer it to them too. And so there's been a lot of demand for this to happen in offices where, people have asked me, can you come into my office? And I'm happy to do that, but to actually go and have everybody participate. Not only does it unify everybody and bring everybody on the same page, it also allows for techniques to be used. And when the doctor expresses their vulnerability that, guys, this is stressful for me. Dentistry is stressful. The compassion that the staff then show the dentist is way different, because now they know they want to make our lives easier. They don't want to see us stressed, because my staff would see me stressed all the time. And so then it helps to build the team. So I think there absolutely is an incredible need out there to do this kind of work as a team. And I'm quite passionate about that. I actually think that there should be sort of regimented programs where this happens. But, in your own office, right now, that your staff coming back their on button is jammed, whether they're single parents, people whose financial situation has been incredibly difficult during this time. To be a mindful leader, to be somebody who is going to be there for these folks, we need to have compassion. And no mindfulness talk, just like the one we're having now, is complete without the word compassion. Because if we don't have compassion towards our staff, then we're missing a whole chunk of who they are as human beings. And if they feel that and know that, they are going to support us even better. So I think we need to show ourselves compassion during COVID, because this has been an incredibly difficult time for us as dentists. And then we need to show it towards our staff. So I worry for all my colleagues who are going through incredibly stressful times. And I think this is why you and I are engaging in this today, in that, you're not alone. And it doesn't, I know people have highs and lows. When a very difficult thing happens in society, people can shoot up outside of their zone of tolerance. So the zone of or window of tolerance is kind of that happy place. You go up and down, your moods go up and down. Like you said, my wife, she just needs a break to watch Netflix and she's okay. That's within, right? That's or read a book, right? That's within your zone of tolerance. But a lot of us shoot up outside in what's called hyperarousal. That's where I go, get all zingy, busy, running, fast and furious. But some of our folks go hypoaroused. They drop down low in dysregulation, detachment. And if you've ever lived with anybody who's had depression or is hypoaroused, it is very difficult.
Well, I've heard, I've always heard the fight or flight binary, but recently people are, and I say recently, over the last number of years, it's been fight, flight, or freeze.
Yes.
And I think that is a coping mechanism that people often go through.
And actually this happened to me in the office. I once had, and this is just around the time that I discovered mindfulness, I experienced freeze. And I was doing a procedure where it's a soft tissue graft from the roof of the mouth. There's a chance you're gonna nick the palatal artery. And I did. And it started to bleed badly. So anybody watching can kind of know just what comes up for you when I even say that.
Yeah.
I froze. And I know how that feels. I actually couldn't move. And so fight, flight, freeze is very interesting. It's protective in nature because it looks like you're dead. So if I freeze and I'm just, lying dead, well, you're like, she's dead, whatever, it's like, you're not going to fight me, right? But fight, flight, freeze, and fight, flight would be the hyperarousal. Freeze would probably be in more of the hypoarousal, but either end of that spectrum are dysregulated behaviors. So if you see somebody running around like crazy, I'm going crazy, I can't, that's out of the zone. And the opposite is also out of the zone. The guy who's just, the girl who's just disconnected and cannot seem to muster any life or energy to do anything.
Yeah, so I think we've probably all been in those three categories at some time in our life. We can all relate.
100%.
So many things as you talk that I think of. Like, as a patient, I remember in New York, the first time I walked into my dental office, and to this day, so that would have been 10 years ago approximately, to this day, the most lasting memory I have of that office is how calm the receptionist was.
Right. Wow.
So it is, I can picture her sitting, I think she took a call and her voice was calm. And she looked at me and she was on the phone and there was a patient and she was calm about it. It was okay. And I'm not sure that she was studying mindfulness. But what I'm thinking is, maybe it's good for business as well. Obviously when your staff is happy, and you retain staff that you like, and maybe you don't have to keep giving them raises because they want to come to work.
Sure.
That's got to be good for business.
And I'll give you an example exactly of that as proof. So when I do a presentation, I usually have this slide in there. I did not go to mindfulness as a coping tool to have a positive effect on my business. I went to it because I had to. I went to it because I needed coping tools because I wanted to be healthy and happy. But what happened is within 1 year of me doing that, my revenue increased 4 times.
Wow.
And those two coincide on a graph. That's not why I did it. But what happened is I actually ended up discovering who I was. What were my strengths? What do I love doing? What can't I do? And then I started to actually get creative. When you're not in fight, flight all the time, the clarity of mind is actually quite interesting. And sometimes that's why they say that the best dentists don't make the best leaders. And there's some literature out there, and you and I might get into mindful leadership at another time, but there's research out there that shows that dentists should be trained in leadership because we are leaders, but we don't behave that way. So if anybody is looking at improving productivity, happiness in the office and everything, I can tell you that personally for me happened. And the reason is I became clear about what was holding me back. I was holding me back. I had surrounded myself with a couple of people that weren't fanning my flames. And in the office, I needed that. And so I was able to then have the courage, which a lot of dentists find so hard, to give and take feedback or to do reviews or to approach staff. I actually found the courage to dismiss a staff member who was not fanning my flames, who I was actually scared to go into my office because of her, and I had hired her.
Okay.
And you would think, how is that even possible, Sally? But I bet there's at least 1 or 2 dentists listening that know what I'm saying. We think we can't survive without them. We keep them. We feel anxious. They bring us down, but we still do it. So there's a lot of little pieces that may have connected like that as to why our practice thrived. As well, the staff were happier. And every time a patient comes in, we always hear, you guys are always laughing. This place is so cool. You guys are so nice. And it's not because of me. I'm and I'm not even at the front desk. And I'm just one person running between rooms. But the demeanor and our language, and that we've made compassion to our patients, to ourselves, a healthy work environment has become really critical for us. So some people might look at integrating mindfulness into their practice because they want to have a healthy practice and something that thrives. It doesn't matter why you do it. No one's going to judge. Whether you do it to make more money, I can tell you, you can. Or if you're doing it because you just want to be at peace, then you can as well. So when you were talking about that office that you remember with the receptionist, I mean, that's golden. If you got someone at the front desk who's like, Julian, welcome. Oh, great. Oh, it's nothing. Oh, you'll be okay. Imagine. But if your receptionist in the morning has had an earful from you, she's not happy to be there. You berated her. She doesn't feel like a part of the team. I'm not sure how she's going to operate at the front desk. And so as leaders, when we are thinking about things we can incorporate into our practices, I really think that mindfulness and bringing some of that into the mix, it's not the only thing, obviously, but into the mix will really boost, because all the studies that are carried out now by Harvard and all the large institutions, they're incorporating mindfulness into their practices because they see that it's helping them grow. So why should dentistry be any different, I think?
Yeah, I mean, Google, one of the world's biggest companies, has a whole program for.
Whole program. It's called Search Inside Yourself, and it's wonderful. I'm engaged in that program, and it really is eye-opening what they've done.
So, yeah, absolutely. Are there any other strategies? Obviously, letting go of a staff member who just doesn't work is extreme, but it's necessary, and I imagine it can have a huge effect on the overall mental, emotional well-being of your team. Are there any other ways to work with that person who's just so good at whatever they do, but who maybe they walk in the room, everyone just tightens up a little bit? Have you any other strategies to try to soften that relationship that might work for someone who's in a situation where they don't want to let someone go, but
yeah, absolutely. And there's 2 techniques that I use with others, because it's not like you get along with everybody you work with. So of course, and it's not like you have to fire people who you don't get along with. That's a dramatic decision that one takes for the business and for your betterment. But on a day-to-day basis, there's lots of coworkers and people who we're different from. We would come to work with them, but we're different. So one thing is boundaries. Now, boundaries is almost, it's a technique you have to practice to perfect, but it's almost like imagining a hula hoop around yourself. Now, this is an emotional boundary. We're not talking about physical boundaries. As dentists, our physical boundaries are always invaded because the patient is so close to us. If I came right up to you guys here, there's even in Zoom, we have physical boundaries, right? You're like, get out of the screen, So we have boundaries, and so our boundaries as dentists are always being invaded. But if we can build emotional boundaries with patients, but also with staff, We're able to say, you know what, I protect what's inside the hula hoop, that's towards me. I respect what's outside the hula hoop, but you don't let those cross. It's not like a hold, it's not like a sieve where their stuff should come, and so there is this professional boundary, a professional emotional boundary. We can't hold emotional boundaries sometimes, although we should with our loved ones in our lives, but there's a whole practice for that. But of course we need to have boundaries with our staff. And when you maintain a boundary and when you don't get triggered by something that a staff member is saying or doing, and you control yourself, and instead of you reacting to stress, they might say something that triggered you. Instead of you being reactive, if you're able to respond to stress, and that's a whole different treat. When you get triggered, you can either react to stress, which is off the cuff, fight, flight. No, you can't do that. You were late. You can't say this. You can't do that. Versus what's called an emotional or a stress response. Whenever we take that 5 seconds, that one breath, that one grounding, when we don't see things as catastrophic and we put it in perspective, we're able to then respond to stress. So I had many episodes where a staff member said something and it was just like, oh my God, boundary, protect yourself. Take a breath. And it sounds so simple, but you know how hard it is to catch yourself with 5 seconds? That pause is actually where mindfulness sits. It's nothing else than that little pause.
When you have the chance to decide how to respond.
Just that chance. And many of us don't give ourselves the chance. So by practicing mindfulness, and that's what we do on the cushion, this practice of coming back to the body, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. So if someone says to me, Sally, ground, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, right. So I know what that's supposed to feel like in my body. I know what feeling heavy should feel like. And that's the practice. So what you do on the cushion, those practices you take off the cushion, our lives don't happen on a cushion, right? And so all these tools about grounding, body scan, breathing, prepare you for the reality in life, which could be a difficult staff member. So practicing a boundary, and also when you are speaking to somebody, there is an activity called mindful listening. It not only happens with staff, but also patients. As a patient's rambling on, most of us aren't listening. We're like, yeah, Mrs. Smith, yeah, what, But if you can actually ground and mindfully listen to the words that are coming, and I urge you guys to right now practice mindful listening with my voice. So if you just clear everything else that's going on, and I say, practicing mindfully is really important to you developing the coping tools that you need. All of a sudden, it's like, did the room just get quiet? Or did she just differently?
Yeah,
So
I felt like more connected to you as well, which is interesting because I always know that I'm in my head, but it just becomes normal. Yeah. And so, I think Stephen Covey of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yes.
One of the famous quotes from that is that people listen to respond, they don't listen to understand. And he's not a mindfulness guru, he's like a business guru, but I felt that connection between what he said and sort of the exercise that we just did. Yeah.
And, good on you that you're exposed to this material or you've searched it out. Many of us don't. And in dental school, ain't nobody told me to mindfully listen to nobody. And only one teacher taught me a lesson, and this was at U of T, and he was an anesthesiologist. And he was walking by the hall one day from me, and I was a first-year dental student. And he said, "How are you, Sally?" I said, "Good. How are you?" He said, "Terrible." I didn't hear that. 2 days later, he found me and he said, "Do you remember when you asked me how I was outside of Clinic 1? He said, "Do you remember what I said?" I'm like, "Good." He's like, "No, I actually said I was terrible." And right there, lesson learned. Not only did I feel ashamed for not hearing him, but that was my first lesson in mindful listening. Because if you're not listening to what someone's saying, it's not going to make any difference. And so that practice it is a practice. So some of the retreats that I've done is me and a random person partnering up. So I would sit across from you, Julian, and I would tell you about something really important that is affecting me. You would have to listen for 1 minute, and then you would have to repeat everything I said back to me. And the exercise here is that you actually have to be so listening to what I'm saying that you can actually say it back to me. And so no one to be hard on themselves if they're not mindfully listening, but practice this with your family members before you go to the office. And when you go back to work and you mindfully listen, your staff might actually be like, sorry, your eyes aren't darting, you're not on the phone, like what's wrong with you? Like what happened to you during COVID? You know, so if one thing, you know, a couple of things you can take to the office literally as part of your stress management, both at home starting now, but also when you go, is of course in your first meeting, because we all have to have meetings with our staff. So if you want to take something out of this talk that we've just had today, maybe just when you go to your seat, you could say, listen, I listened to this lady do this mindfulness talk. She said, maybe we can all just breathe and show them and see the response that you get. I bet you'll be so surprised. And number two is maybe then even say the word, guys, I think we're going to actively or mindfully listen to each other. Boom. You'll be a changed person. They'll be like, some amazing person came out of COVID, right? And so there's many tools that we could incorporate on a day-to-day basis. And we practice the quick body scan, you know, where I told everybody to feel their bum on the chair. And there is one more practice if you want to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So it's called a 5 minute. It's called a hand breathing. So I want you to put up your hand, and with the index finger of your other hand, I want you to trace. So not only is this tactile, but it's breathing. So on the way up, you take an in breath, pause at the top, and exhale. Inhale up, and exhale. Inhale up, and exhale down. Inhale up, exhale out. Inhale up, and exhale down. That's it.
Well, I felt incredibly relaxed, and it only took 30 seconds.
It's literally 30 seconds.
I mean, I constantly am saying to myself, I don't have time to meditate. You know, and I get stressed. It's another thing I can't do. Another thing I haven't gotten to.
Yes.
And it feeds into that cycle. But I think, you know, this has shown me at least that if I could, there's a book called Tiny Habits, I think.
Yes.
Like that.
Yeah.
And I've been for years trying to develop a regular meditation habit. And, you know, I'll go for an hour one day and then 2 days, and then can't do it anymore. And, you know, but you know, maybe if I made my goal doing something like that once or twice a day.
Yeah. So
you know, I get used to it and get used to that feeling.
Yeah. So I do different length meditations depending on the mood, because one of the worst things that you can do is to judge yourself and force yourself. And one of the most important things that you learn in mindfulness is to be non-judgmental towards yourself first, and then eventually towards others. And I'm the biggest judge, so I judge myself all the time. I can't do this right. You know, this is one more thing I can't get right. You know, I got to get this meditation thing right. So I'll gauge my mood in the morning, because I meditate every morning. And I always do guided meditation, and I can share much more information with whoever's interested. I do a guided meditation. So whether you use Headspace, Calm, or I use some mindfulness teachers that I follow, and I'll choose a 9 minute. There's one called 9 Magic Breaths. And actually on my website, I have done 61 videos for every day of COVID.
What's your website?
Mindfuldentist.ca.
Mindfuldentist.ca.
Yeah.
That's
so
a great.
If you go on and you click videos, I have made 61 videos. Each of them is 5 minutes, and some of them have meditations incorporated. And there's one that I do that's it's just 9 magic breaths. So none of your meditations have to be significant. And no one's going to give you an award if you sat for an hour. And actually the most wise meditation teachers tell you to go with what feels right to you. So the other day I did a 35-minute meditation and I felt so good. But this morning, zingy day, I had all this stuff to do for the office, the N95 crap. So today I did a 9-minute meditation. And there really is no rule. And because mindfulness and meditation are two different things, you do not need to practice 1 minute of meditation to be a mindful person. So by being mindful is the things we did during this talk. You listen, you ground, you take a moment, you observe your thoughts, you give yourself a break, you try to cut out the judgment. These are all mindfulness practices. So we don't need to force ourselves to sit on a cushion, like you're going to go home, Julian, to your wife or whatever, and you can give yourself permission at the door. I talked to Sally, I did everything for the office, whatever. I'm going to walk in there, and for 1 hour, I'm going to put my phone away and I'm going to be with whoever is there. That is such a gift. That's not a cushion. It's not a meditation. It's nothing. It's just a break. So
in the moment.
In the moment. And because we're so busy right now as dentists, no one's asking any dentist right now to practice meditation. And if you don't, you're not going to survive COVID. That's not true. We're all surviving COVID. Dentists are resilient and we're making it. And these are little tools you can incorporate to make life a little easier. So digital detox, give yourself a tiny little break, and you'll be more clear. We don't want to let go of our thoughts because we think that that's what's going to get us out of trouble. Not really.
Don't fight against the thoughts.
When you're thinking all the time, you're only using one portion of your brain. And the minute you calm the system, you'd be shocked that another thought comes up that I'm just like, oh my God. So the next time you're in the shower, just take a shower. This is cliche, you've heard it. The next time you brush your teeth, just brush your teeth. But it's actually committing to doing it. And so there's very easy things that we can do. And I don't want anybody to walk away today thinking, I can't meditate, so I'm never going to be a mindful person. Not true. Not true. I have gone weeks without meditating. Like there's times where I'm like, I'm never meditating again. Like this thing doesn't work. And, it's because we're human, and I'm not, I don't ever want to give the impression that, my moods are so stable because I've been doing this for 5 years. And I would actually approach teachers, very wise mindfulness teachers, and be like, why am I not calm? And they're like, what's wrong with that? Like, that's okay. You don't have to be calm. And I'm like, I have to be a calm person. And they're like, no, you don't. So it frees you of all the judgments you make about yourself.
Accept yourself where you are.
Sure.
Start where you are.
Start where you are.
Good advice. It's good advice. It's really the only option.
Yeah, that's right.
For those who maybe need a little hook on the business side, when somebody thinks of a person who really leaves a positive impression on them, you hear this saying of, she treats you like you're the only person in the world when you're talking to her. And for me, that's the person who's listening to you.
Yeah.
They're not looking at their phone. They're not thinking about who's walking by. They're just looking at you and listening to you, and you can feel that you're being listened to. And so, when it comes to trust, I feel like you build trust with patients by listening to them and accepting them and hearing them and understanding them. And so, a lot of people, there's a lot of different groups out there and schools of thought about case acceptance and stuff like that. But I think, if and maybe you've had this experience or maybe not, but if you listen to your patient and hear what their interests are and what their anxieties are and what they're actually saying to you, there may be opportunities there to say, well, what I'm understanding is, these are your values, and here's how maybe dentistry can help you reach those. Has that been, part of your journey?
Yeah, for sure. So there's two things that I can tell you right off the bat affected both case acceptance in my practice and the trust that you were saying. Because ultimately, if people are if the bum is in the chair, they know they need something, so that they know something's going on. And because we're so quick to judge patients, both based on where they're at, what their needs are, how much money do they have, would they
Right.
accept this treatment, all those judgments. So when I stop judging myself, I realized I stopped judging others. And so what happened is, if I'm not going to judge myself, why would I judge you? I don't know you. So I mindfully listen to you, everything down. I'm looking at you. I want to hear what you have to say. You're in pain. You're not faking your pain. And so when I'm listening to you, and you know that I'm hearing you, then you're going to build the trust right away. So why would you feel that maybe I'm not being honest with what I'm saying? Because I'm actually listening to what you're saying. And people like to hear you repeat it back. So the first thing you want to do is, am I understanding it correctly that you said that this? So when you repeat it back to somebody, they know you listened. It's not you're half facing the computer, typing away, oh yeah, what? And your assistant's adjusting the light, and what they're saying seems to be not important. So case acceptance, we have to listen, and compassion. You have to see the person as a human being. And so people know when they are being looked at in a kind and compassionate way. And I'm not saying there's a difference between empathy and compassion. Notice I did not say empathize. I said be compassionate. Studies have shown it's actually empathy that leads to burnout, not compassion. Empathy is me putting myself in your shoes and suffering with you. That's not a good doctor. A good doctor is, I see you're in pain and I am compassionate. I know that you're in pain. What can I do to help you? And so whenever people talk about burnout as it's related to us bleeding out in the office, those who are compassionate to themselves will know their own boundary. I'm not going to leave the office exhausted and just, come home with zero left in my battery, because I've got two kids, 15 and 12, so never mind. But I also have a husband who's in the profession. If I come home with zero in my battery, and if I'm living with what matters most to me, which is my loved ones and my kids, my husband, my family, my close friends, and I'm coming home with zero left in the tank, that's kind of not good on me.
Right.
And so compassion fuels you. Empathy is a bit draining. So and I speak to this when I speak to medical doctors, is that when we understand the difference between empathy and compassion, we're then able to actually be there for our patients, but not really feel their pain to the extent that then it drains us.
Right.
And so
But with compassion, you help. And everyone as caregivers, you know that feeling that it charges your battery a little when you can help someone. And you just I think thinking about helping or planning to help or trying to find help for somewhere else for someone has that same effect of, they've done these studies lately where, they'll either, they'll have two control groups, and one person will find a $20 bill on the street. And they'll set it up. And then another person, all they'll say is, I want you to do a favor for someone. And sometimes they'll tell them what favor it is. I just want you to help somebody who needs help today. Study the happiness of those people. And the people who find the $20 on the street, they get happy for 20 minutes. And the person who helps someone feels happier at the end of the day. Feel more lasting satisfaction. And so when you're helping your patients, they're more likely to trust you and sign up for, the treatment they need, and B, they're better about it at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And, and the other thing is, some people listening are like, this all sounds so altruistic and great. Oh yeah, be compassionate to everybody. And, I think we need to be careful, or I should be careful to also say, I have also those patients who I am very compassionate towards, who I've mindfully listened to, who then have shown me a different side. But when I have my boundary, I then don't let that affect me personally. I look at that. I know I did my best. I gave everything I could. I was there. I listened. And patients can make whatever decisions they want. We're not
Right.
going to judge ourselves and say, you know, now I'm at work and I did all that stuff and it didn't work. No, we're going to say, you know what? That's the way I operate. My operative way is to be compassionate and a good listener.
Mhm.
Eventually, you will only attract that.
Right.
You actually attract what you put out.
Mhm.
So I used to put out this persona at the beginning of my practice. Like I was this doctor in this white lab coat, and I thought that I had to be a certain way. And I actually gravitate to me patients that were like, and I want this result. And I was like, and I'm going to give you that result.
Very transactional. Very transactional.
And then I realized my practice was filled with people who made me nervous. Yeah, because I was putting myself out. I never used the word, I'm trying my best.
Right.
Never.
Right.
I was like the more perfect topic. And actually, I wrote an article about being a recovering perfectionist for Gary Glassman as an editorial in oral health. And being the perfectionist, I was like, I'm going to give you a perfect result.
Right.
So what you put out. And so now I don't get as stressed, because if someone's looking for perfection and I say to them, this is what chances are that it's going to be like that, then if that doesn't jive with the patient, they might go elsewhere, but then I also will be okay. But in the end, you want to surround yourself and grow a family of people who support your values. And so whatever they are, I don't judge, whatever they are. And if you like, if that perfectionist thing works for you, you put it out there and you're okay with the good. No one's.
Yeah. That's amazing. We've gone over an hour.
Okay. Yeah.
We had one question from Millie, not a question. She's just showering praise on you.
Oh, that's thank you.
she says it's fantastic, and she appreciates the webinar, and that, you know, all this information can really be life-changing, and it can. So I want to thank you as well for your time. This was a really great hour that I got to spend. So it was a gift for me. I hope our participants who were watching enjoyed it as much as I did. So you know, I've seen you speak before, and that was fantastic. And I hope to see you again. So from Dental Corp, I'd like to say thank you. The one other question just popped up.
Sure.
And I think it's a good question. So maybe we'll finish on this. And any other things that pop up in the Q&A, we'll send you, Sally, and if you can maybe jot down some short answers, or maybe we can do a part 2 someday. But the last question is, how does labeling our thoughts our meditation process?
Yeah, so that actually labeling the thoughts as what they are is the practice of meditation.
Okay.
The first thing I learned, and that's a really good question, the first thing I learned was being able to label the thoughts. So you know, in these meditations, you can do imagery where you can put your thoughts on a cloud and watch them drift away. And then another thought pops up, you put it in a cloud and you watch it drift away. But this is a cliche saying, which is name it to tame it. So when you can name your different emotions, you can tame them. So the practice of meditation in naming what's happening, being worry, anger, random thought, sadness, right? Sadness. I mean, there's things that come up during meditation that shock me. There's mornings that I sit and I'm so angry. And I'm like, I just woke up. What could be making me so angry? But you name it to tame it. And the importance of labeling them is not to judge them. I'm not saying worry. Oh my God, I constantly worry. No, I'm like, worry, that's just a thought. And so if we get too attached to our thoughts, we become them. And then you become, if I say to myself, or if I constantly say, I'm always worrying, I'm always anxious, then sure enough, my life is going to be filled with anxiety. But if you label certain things as just thoughts, think of them just like the emojis. You know, when you're frustrated and you want to send like, I love the emoji with the red face with the blurb.
The head exploding.
That's like my favorite emoji ever. Like I'll send like 15 of those in a row, right? And so that's naming it. Name it to tame it. And if anybody ever saw the fabulous, wonderful movie Inside Out, which was a cartoon.
Oh, it was an amazing movie. Super.
It's so well done.
Yes.
And if you notice, there were the different sort of people in her head.
It was so true.
It's so true. And if you notice that the point of the movie was that once sadness was shunned out and she was lost and joy was in control, actually that wasn't a great feeling, because joy was so and loud and happy all the time. So we need all of our emotions. So if we start to judge certain emotions as wrong or bad, we get in trouble. So the idea of meditating, and I think the question was specific about meditation, was that it's okay if you want to label it as something and then watch it drift away, or come back and ground yourself, center to the breath or the body, senses, to your fingers, no problem. But just don't get caught up in judging your emotions.
Don't be the thought, don't judge the thought.
Observe it. It's not easy. Just observe your thoughts.
Just observe. It's not, but we can all do it. Everyone can do it, but just don't get too frustrated with yourself. Before we go, there's a saying once. Have you ever heard, "I think, therefore I am"?
Yes.
And I was watching somebody talk about mindfulness, and they said that's actually false. The person who thinks
is not who you are.
It's not the same person who says "I am."
100%. I know, and it can get a little warpy, right? It can get a little like philosophical by the fire after 3 glasses of wine.
Well, can you observe yourself observing yourself observing? Like, how far can you go?
If anybody's ever read the book "The Power of Now" by Eckhart Tolle, okay, everybody and their mother has read that book, and for good reason. But if you ever listen to Eckhart Tolle talk, it's a little one of those where like you observe the observer who observes, and you can get lost in that world. And trust me, I've been to enough meditation things to.
You can always laugh at it too, and just accept. It can be funny as well. Thank you again.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Question I'm gonna send to you to answer. Thank you all the participants. Have a great night.
Thank you, Julian.
Stay healthy.
Take care. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.